They all walked out of the hotel in broad daylight as if they hadn't a care in the world who saw them, hopped in the rental van they had hired, and drove around the block to park and sit and smoke cigarettes. Chandler and Rabbit got out to talk in private, and the mercenary from the lobby told the others what had happened. "What a bitch," was the general consensus. Chandler told Rabbit out on the deserted sidewalk, and he fought to keep from breaking down and sobbing his eyes out. For the first time, not caring who'd see him and think him to be gay, Rabbit put his arms around Chandler and held him. The singer resisted for a moment and then let go, hoping the tears would wash the pain away, but they just didn't come. His throat hitched a little, but nothing happened. "I guess we're in the same boat," he mumbled. Rabbit let him go, stepped back, and lit a cigarette just to be doing something. He saw Juleng with her suitcase wandering the streets in the distance over Chandler's shoulder, but said nothing. "How are you handling it?" Chandler asked, remembering he hadn't thought at all about his friend's broken heart, worrying only about his own problem. "You ever hear of the poet Dryden?" Rabbit asked. Chandler nodded. Rabbit paused to spit a tiny scrap of tobacco off of his lip, then took off his sunglasses. He looked so different from that crazy guy in Antigua just a few months before. "I am a little wounded," he said, "but I am not slain. I'll lay me down to bleed a while, and then rise to fight again." Chandler nodded, then looked off to the side at nothing. While he squinted, Juleng disappeared with her suitcase into a door in the distance behind him. Rabbit blinked once, like the shutter of a camera clicking. "Well," Chandler said, "you ever eat Dickens?" Rabbit nodded. Chandler took a deep breath and said, "It is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done. It is a far, far better rest that I go to than I have ever known." The corner of Rabbit's mouth twitched in what could have been a smile, thinking, mine was better. He flicked the cigarette away and turned, saying over his shoulder, "Coming?" He pulled the handle and rolled the door back, clambering in, and took a seat, the mercenaries shushing each other around him. He looked at Blue Tick, sitting sandwiched between Nadir and Frank, and said, "Let's go back in there and kill them all." Tick nodded with a down-curving smile. "We didn't get all dressed up for nothing." He handed Rabbit a Kevlar vest. Rabbit looked at the open door, thinking, "What's keeping—" And then he sat up in alarm, suddenly remembering what that Dickens line was from. He rushed to the door and looked out, and Chandler was nowhere to be seen. Whistling the battle theme from The Prince of Foxes with his hands thrust into his pockets, Chandler strode around the corner and down the street back to the hotel. When it hove into view, two vans pulled up right in front and the back doors popped open, spilling out at least a dozen working-class thugs. Chandler had to grin as they hurried inside, several of them each trying to be the first one in the revolving door, colliding with one another. "Too late," he thought. "You've arrived too late. But for me, you're just in time." He waited for them all to get inside, took a deep breath to harness his chi, and looked at the sky. "I don't know if this is a good thing or bad," he said. "To be honest, I don't care either way. I trust my soul, if I even have one, to whoever's up there, and you can send me to hell or a leper colony on the Ganges or wherever you want. All I'm asking is that you help me live the next few minutes like a real man." Then he waited for a car to pass and stepped off the curb and crossed the street, passing between two vans, watched his reflection approaching in the glass of the revolving door. He squinted to see through the mirror of the glass, hoping to see if they hadn't noticed him yet, but by the time he could, it was too late. Rabbit sprinted to the corner with the vest in his hand, got to the edge of the building, and saw Chandler almost at the far end of the block. He cursed, turned, and waved at the men's heads peeking out of the van to come on. Before they could ask what, Rabbit was gone, racing off down the sidewalk with a bulletproof vest flapping in his red fist. Alexei and the dozens of men in the lobby looked up as Chandler pushed his way through the revolving door. It was a shock to see him, such a shock that it didn't even register for a second, until the thin, androgynous man lifted the hem of his shirt and pulled out a pistol, and pulled the second while raising the first. The men of the hotel and the newly arrived thugs all were frozen for an instant, and the first shot seemed to come across in slow motion, yellow light spitting 3 times from the first gun, and the loud flat bang seeming to come from across vast gulfs of time and space. 2 men were kicked backwards off their feet like dogs jerked on a leash, and the rest scattered, some of them falling and throwing up their arms into the air, some of them twisting in mid-step to crumple, spinning to the floor. Chandler walked slowly into the middle of the lobby, just firing and firing until the breeches of his pistols locked open and he dropped them to clatter on the marble floor, pulling his own weapon and one of the backups he'd taken from those goons who'd held him. Men dove behind cream and lavender Louis Quinze swan fainting couches next to Louis XIV's occasional tables that were not bulletproof, landing an instant before holes birched out of the fabric and spat wisps of cotton batting, and splinters of wood flew spinning from ornate carvings. Other men ducked behind giant ferns and blue and white porcelain Chinese willow-patterned vases that exploded into jagged shards, collapsing and shattering further. An instant later, the floor was littered with dead and dying men, and bursts of light came dazzling from behind the corners of walls and doors and from the front desk. Chandler let his 2 guns fall spinning slowly from his hands, and he closed his eyes and stretched both his arms out from his sides to embrace his fate. The lamps and windows shattered. The crystal beads and teardrops of the Louis Quinze chandelier burst into sparkling sand before the entire thing fell to crunch on the marble next to Chandler, and the thick glass of the revolving doors cracked and spiderwebbed, exploding an instant later as Rabbit came with a tigerish leap through it, hitting the floor on his shoulder and rolling back up onto his feet. He charged, tackling Chandler to the ground and dropping the Kevlar vest over him, hoping it would cover him enough. Then, with a devilish grin, his eyes blazing, he pulled both of his guns and rose, skipping sideways as shots clipped clouds of dust and spat gravel out of the marble between his feet. The whine of ricochets and thunder of gunshots was deafening in the lobby, but all the shots fired by Alexei's men were fired blindly, and Rabbit's were made with a shrewd eye. In the split seconds that the hot winds of bullets flashed past him, he aimed at the fist-holding guns from behind what little cover there was, and shot fingers and knuckles clean off. As if the hand of God was pushing him out of the way, the shots by Alexei's men all seemed to go just wide enough to miss him, but Chandler felt enough of them thunking into the vest that just barely covered him.